Welcome to the Saturday morning Love Wrestling Reacts. I'm Ed Fries, and I'm joined by Astrid and Lawrence. And we got to talk about the week in wrestling. It's been an interesting one. It was quiet for a while, and then last night kind of blew everything up. But before we talk about all of that, I just want to make sure I thank our sponsors, RK Athletics. If you're looking for any kind of physical fitness stuff, especially if you're in the Canadian area, they're also doing, as I know during the pandemic, they were doing some virtual training. If you need any of that, look up Rich King with RK Athletics on Facebook, Instagram, and Twitter. It should be RK Athletics in all those locations, and we thank them for sponsoring Love Wrestling in everything we do. And we are joined, obviously, the man in charge is always here. Spencer says, hello, friends. I promise I won't burn the place down while Parrish is gone.
I definitely will. I 100% will burn this place to the ground. This is my goal for the stream.
As long as I don't do it, I think I don't get in trouble, so we're good.
No, you're getting future endeavored.
Probably. I mean, I'm sure Nick Khan is already running the cost-benefit analysis.
Yeah.
But speaking of the cost-benefit analysis and the releases, obviously we should talk about that. So, last night we got hit with another set of releases. Another 12 superstars were released. I'm going to go over the list, and this comes courtesy of Sean Ross Sapp and Fightful. And it is Bobby Fish, Bronson Reed, Jake Atlas, Ari Sterling, Leon Ruff, Stephen Smith, Tyler Rust, Zachariah Smith, Asher Hale, Giant Zanjeer, Mercedes Martinez, and the finest, Kona Reeves. Save the best for last on that one. Honestly, I'm sorry. I'm a huge Kona Reeves fan. I always have been. Oh, we have our friend Alex in here saying hello all.
Oh.
Hello. These releases definitely hit out of the middle of nowhere. It's not the first time that we've seen releases hit with athletes on 205 Live right after the releases were announced. It was a lot closer to Showtime this time than it was last time. But Ari Sterling was on 205 Live taking on Kushida last night, and Kushida did tweet his appreciation for Ari Sterling. But I'm going to throw it to you, Lawrence. What do you think about the releases?
It's always rough. You think about it from like a human perspective, that these guys have families, men and women have families. It's like you hear repeatedly that the morale's low in WWE because like you get signed there, you're hoping like maybe I can buy a house now, I can settle down, I've got a schedule that we can keep to, I know where my shows are, and now everything is constantly up in the air. Like with all the releases we've seen in the last year, like you used to think like, well, I'm doing great with merch, I've got a great storyline, there's no reason why they would release me. And we've seen multiple guys like that who've been big stars, both on NXT and in WWE, that like these guys are doing what you're supposed to do to make it in WWE, and they still got the rug pulled out from under them. So like from a human perspective, I don't know how everyone there feels or knows, like, man, how I get to next week, how I plan for next month, because you never know when that call's coming. Or that tweet from Sean Ross Sapp, who sadly has the horrible job being like the wrestling's Grim Reaper right now.
Yeah. Astrid, what about you?
It just feels at this point like nobody's safe. I mean, like we see people not only from NXT to Bray Wyatt recently, so it feels like it can happen to anybody at any time, and it's just upsetting to see this, especially how it happened last night during SmackDown. Okay.
Hold on. I think we're still here. Sorry, my computer decided to do some stuff. Are we still here?
Yeah.
Yep, we're all good.
There we go. Okay, now we got Cody in as well. Sorry, Astrid, you were saying?
Yeah.
I was saying how it feels like nobody's safe. It happens to anybody and everybody at this point, and it's just upsetting to see. It's hard to be in support WWE at this point with everything going on.
Yeah. Cody, your thoughts on the releases? That's what we're talking about right now as we're doing our main opening point.
Surprising. Some big names in there that I definitely didn't expect to see. Bronson Reed, Bobby Fish being the biggest ones. Mercedes, I mean, is big. She's been in angles recently, but ultimately she kind of played out the Tien Shaw angle. So Not sure where else she had to go at this point, but
Mhm.
just a big list of a lot of names there that it definitely feels like Nick Khan and Vince are coming in and saying, do we have something for this guy right now? Is he working on something? No? Okay, bye. Like Bronson just came out, had that one off with Cole, and then where was he going next? Bobby Fish came out, had his match with Strong. Where does he go next? So it kind of felt like if they have nothing for them, out the door you go.
And speaking of Bronson Reed, JPJ, our friend with the War Report and Between Two Beards, says Bronson Reed was a made man coming out of the Mania Takeover, was doing tryout matches last week. What is going on? And that's the big story coming out of some of this, is that you have a guy like Bronson Reed who seems like everybody was behind him. It seemed like he was headed to the main roster, and all of a sudden the rug got pulled out from under him. In the pre-show lobby, we were chit-chatting a little bit, and I did some investigative journalism and found something interesting. Nick Khan's job before he came to WWE was working as a sports agent. He had worked at IAA, and he also worked at CAA. CAA's link is really important because CAA is who represents WWE in their own financial, and avenues. Nick Khan was their representative, and then they took him from CAA and brought him into this. So his whole job is making sure that contracts get ironed out and making sure that they're working within a budget and getting the most for their money. And they brought him in as a chief revenue officer. So that it has to mean that their line of thinking is that they need somebody in to right the ship. I think this is because the stock price took such a huge hit. I believe it was at almost $100 a share at one point, and now it's down to, I checked this morning, at $50 a share. I think that's where we're headed. I think that's the whole cost. The reason why all these things are happening, in my mind, is because the company is trying to right the stock price. And I don't know if the stock market and the stockholders care about the television product. They should, because the television product being good will make the stock price better. But without, we don't know anything. We can't know anything. All we know is that amazing talent are losing their jobs. We have seen so many people released over the last 2 years. And based on a number from Sean Ross Sapp last night on Twitter, 18% of the people released since 2020 have full-time contracts somewhere else. Of the people released in 2021, only 2 of them are working under a contract in another company currently. 3 if you count Ruby Soho as signed to All Elite Wrestling, and that's still unconfirmed at this point. I wanted to throw it to one of you guys to talk about what do you think this does for talent potentially coming to WWE, and does this pose a problem with recruiting the next generation of stars? And we'll start with Cody because we ended with Cody on the last question.
It's a really good question, Ed. If I was looking at it now and seeing this, that I come in, I sign a contract, I'm in the performance center, I'm getting my shots in NXT, and then Vince comes down from the main roster, says, "Well, I got nothing for you up here. Here's the door." That you got a ton of job security questions at that point, and I mean, everybody wants to live their dream and take that shot, but with all of these other companies coming up now, you got Impact, ROH, NJPW with their American branding, AEW, everybody coming in, taking a shot on some of these talents. I mean, there's plenty of options if WWE doesn't work out, but do you want to put yourself in that position prior to, or do you just go to one of the other brands first?
Yeah, and to continue on the point that I was just bringing up, Denise Salcedo typed up this list last night, and I think it's an interesting list, and I want to go over it. It is the name of all talent released in 2020 and 2021. It's going to take me a minute, so let me get through this. Zelina Vega, Akam and Rezar, Rusev, Eric Rowan, Sarah Logan, Carl Anderson, Luke Gallows, Maria Kanellis, Cain Velasquez, Zack Ryder, Primo, Epico, Mike Bennett, EC3, Leo Rush, Deanna Perrazzo, Cassius Ono, Kurt Hawkins, Heath Slater, Eric Young, Curtis Axel, Noe Jose, MJ Jenkins, Alexar Jasic, Dash Wilder, Kurt Angle, Aiden English, Gerald Briscoe, Mike Rotunda, Mike Chioda, Yifang, Travis Banks, Tino Sabatelli, Tay Conti, Heath Slater, Sean Davari, Serena Deeb, Scott Dawson, Nick Oligari, Mohammed Freham, Mars Wang, Marco Gomes, Luke Harper, Ligero, Kelly, Kyrie Sane, Jack Gallagher, Jazzy Gabbert, Hussein Al-Dagari, Faisal Kurdi, Edgar Lopez, Dan Matha, Cesar Bononi. Okay, now we're out of 2020. Just to prove a point, that was 2020. Bobby Fish, Mercedes Martinez, Leon Ruff, Tyler Russ, Bronson Reed, Jake Atlas, Ari Sterling, Kona Reeves, Zachariah Smith, Asher Hale, Giant Zangier, Stephen Smith, Desmond Troy, Ric Flair, Bray Wyatt, Chase Parker, Matt Martell, Killian Dane, Marina Shafir, Arturo Ruas, Kurt Salian, Sunil Singh, Samir Singh, Lars Sullivan, Big Show, Steve Cutler, Andrade, Billy Kay, Peyton Royce, Samoa Joe, Kalisto, Chelsea Green, Mickey James, Tucker, Bo Dallas, Mojo Rawley, Wesley Blake, Jessamine Duke, Kavita Devi, Vanessa Bourne, Skylar Story, Ezra Judge, Alexander Wolf, Velveteen Dream, Braun Strowman, Lana, Buddy Murphy, Aleister Black, Ruby Riott, August Gray, Arya Davari, Tony Nese, Tyler Breeze, Fandango, Santana Garrett, Tino Sabatelli.
And that's a show, everyone.
It sounds like a lot.
Yeah.
It sounds like a lot when you read it out like that.
Yeah, but to think they released that much talent, you could run a company on that talent. Now, granted, that talent might not be big enough to run a company in terms of star power, but that's enough names to have a legitimate brand or company. These are people who were released in the last 2 years, and the company still has an overflow of talent. They've been hoarding talent for 6 years, keeping the best and the brightest, and training as many as they can, and keeping as many as they can, without anywhere for anybody to go until AEW started for the most part. Because, let's all be honest, Impact and New Japan weren't what they are now, back when WWE was hoarding most of this talent. The question is, if you're working for WWE, do you sign a new contract with this company knowing that at any moment it's going to be gone? Or do you take a chance on yourself, like Cody Rhodes did, and go out into the open market? Lawrence, let's go ahead and start with you.
I would say, like, it's definitely becoming a tougher and tougher decision to stay there. But, like, how you look at it, especially naming that it's really a small percentage of people that have gotten signed to other companies so far, which is why, it's also important for us to, as things start opening up wherever we are, to support independent promotions, because that's where a lot of these guys are going to go to work for a while. Like, they're going to get their merch sales up. They're going to have to be working in indies, because sadly AEW can't sign everyone. Impact's got a budget. Everyone's got a certain amount of talent they can put on the air, especially now that they're all sort of sharing. But yeah, if I was one of them, I would say WWE still offers that regular paycheck that, like, especially wrestlers who were working the indies or younger guys who want to get off the ground, who don't have families yet, who don't have to worry about a mortgage. Like, you do get, like, at least at the bare minimum, you do get some of the best training in the world working at the Performance Center, which, like, but I don't think it's the end stop anymore for people. Like, I think people are going to start thinking, like, maybe my contract WWE is going to be a stop on the road if I'm starting a career. Like, I'm not going to be there. I might not be there 5 years from now, but, like, I can get what I can from this experience while I'm here. So let's say, like, it's no more like this sort of home of stability for professional wrestling. I'm like, I'm going to be here for 10 years, and and I'll be able to make my name if I work hard, which just isn't true anymore. You're seeing guys who have worked their ass off in WWE, made a name for themselves, and got cut. So it's still, there's still that like name value of signing there, but like it's like a team, like seeing a professional sports team that's struggling, like a big name team like the Knicks or the Cowboys. Like the people will still sign there for like, because I want to be that with that team. But like if they're having a bad season or a bad couple of years, it's going to be, they're going to not necessarily get the preferred pick of free agents.
And we just had an interesting comment, and I'm going to have Astrid be the first one to take this and then tackle any of the other questions that we've been brought up in the last couple of minutes. But Alex, our friend, says, I wonder if these cuts are them trying to free up money for Adam Cole to stay. Astrid, what do you think?
I was thinking about this last night. It's kind of tough to think about because thinking of all the people on that list, they have only resigned Drake, Joe, and Zelina. And from what I saw, my brother was telling me he was listening to the Jericho podcast with Tommy, and Tommy said when Zelina resigned, she resigned because she thought Alistair was still going to be in WWE. And then they made her promises, and that's the main reason why she signed, not only to be with him, but because of the promises they made her. And it makes you also wonder, like, look at the way they've been bringing her up on SmackDown so far. She's been losing every one of her matches. And I think it crossed my mind. I'm like wondering, does that have to do like they're trying to save money for Cole? I don't know, but it's tough because how many people are we cutting for this? I'm like, those are top names in NXT, like Bronson Reed. Like we thought he was gonna be in the main roster soon, and it's just Bobby Fish just had a match last week. It's incredible to think like you can be on TV 1 week and then the next week you're gone. It's I don't know. I don't even know what to think when I see these names like that. It's incredible.
And I'm going to bring this comment up. I just had it up, but I'm going to bring it back up again. Mighty Joe says, I think it's cutting costs because ultimately they're still looking to sell to the right buyer that comes along. Now, well, I see that point, and I see it more and more as more people get cut. And I agree that I think Vince would be an idiot to not take the right deal if the right deal came along. But I think that would have to be a knockdown, no-brainer deal for Vince to take it. This industry's in his blood. He got into it against the advice of his father. And love the man or hate the man, and it's harder and harder every day to be a fan of the WWE with all of these things happening. Because while you want to support the talent, it's so impossible to support the company making business decisions like this. To support them in a feasible way, because giving them my attention and my viewership means I'm giving them money, and giving them money just seems counterproductive to supporting the talent that works for them. But as a kid, I grew up in the Northeast, and WWE was the only wrestling that I watched for a long time. I know in different parts of the country, you watch different products. If you were down south, you may have seen more WCW than WWE. But I grew up with that end destination of, when I was a kid, I wanted to be a WWE superstar. I wanted to be a WWE wrestler. My favorite wrestler was Shawn Michaels growing up. We're growing up in a generation of kids who are now looking at the world in a completely different light, where they have access to wrestling from around the world. And the fact that being a WWE fan, what used to mean being a wrestling fan meant being a WWE fan, now means something completely different. And it's almost like Josh said it best in our group chat the other day. The wrestling landscape just seems so toxic right now. Not to mention, just all the things going on, but anything around wrestling just seems so toxic. It'd be nice to have... It was so nice the last couple of weeks to have something nice to talk about with the return of CM Punk and potentially Daniel Bryan in AEW and all these fun things. In the last 2 weeks, it's been back to reality. We got releases and WWE's back on the mantle. We're coming up to SummerSlam. We're coming up to AEW's. Oh God, I just spaced. What's AEW's pay-per-view in 2 weeks, 3 weeks?
All Out.
All Out. Thank you. We're coming into All Out. We're coming into SummerSlam. We're coming into a huge period for wrestling, and I feel like wrestling fans are at their lowest point right now because there's so much tribalism and so much hatred towards WWE, and it's getting harder and harder to defend against that. And Joe brings up a good point. Vince McMahon, oh, there it goes. Vince has a great legacy, but it's really time for him to at least step aside and let somebody else run things. My question is there anyone that he trusts that wants the mantle? Does Stephanie want to do that for full time? Does Triple H want to do that? And does Shane want to do that? Because those are the three obvious successors. If you were going to give your wrestling dollar to any one company right now, where would that go? And we'll start with Astrid.
No, you put me on the spot so quick.
Sorry. Do you want me to go to somebody else?
Yeah, that's okay. It's kind of tough because for me, at least, I've been watching more NXT recently. But at this point, with the talent and the storylines, I'd rather give it to AEW because I feel like they've been highlighting more people. They've been switching it up between people, giving us different things and keeping us on our toes every week because that's how it's been with their episodes. You never know what's going to happen every week. So if it was me, I would be AEW at the moment.
Cody?
Joe makes his point there, and I'm kind of on the same page with it. Ultimately, if it could go to NXT without it going to overall WWE, it would be. I would love to see NXT become the flagship show of its own brand. If Vince wants to step aside and let Raw and SmackDown do whatever they do or sell it off to somebody else to be another company, if Hunter could take NXT and NXT UK and make it its own thing and grow it from there, I think that would be ideal. But other than that, New Japan.
Yeah. Lawrence?
Yeah, I'm definitely leaning more like AEW, just because, like I said, they've done a good job of highlighting independent stars. And even if they don't necessarily sign them, they can then charge for more money. It leads to them getting more jobs. And right now, where it's still sort of incredibly tough to get work because some like Canadian wrestlers can't go across the border yet to work. It's hard to go to the States. You still got limitations where you're working. So AEW at least provides them a chance, especially at the beginning of the pandemic, a chance to showcase their talents. So for right now, like if I had to choose one necessarily to play the game, yes, it'd probably be AEW right now.
And I mean, I agree. It's so hard to figure out where that dollar would go. I'd probably lean towards where Cody said, but I'd even still, and this is going to hurt to say, I'd still give it to WWE. My favorite talent still resides in WWE. The favorite type of wrestling that I enjoy still results in WWE. And that being said, my wrestling dollar will go there. I think AEW is wonderful, but it doesn't. There's too much going on in AEW, too many different types of storytelling, that for me it becomes less enjoyable. Because they're not trying to focus, like with WWE, they focus on sports entertainment and the many facets that they believe is entertainment, which are hit and miss. I mean, a doll is not my form of entertainment, but you live and you learn. That being said, Joe brings up a good point with New Japan Pro Wrestling. They have their Resurgence show coming up. That show has now gotten so big that they're bringing in Tanahashi for that show, which means it's going to be great. Because Tanahashi is the ace, and the ace is always wonderful. Although his knees are starting to, give him a bit of a problem. Now, I'm going to move a little bit with the releases, and we're going to stick on them, but the developers of 2K22, these poor guys have had a really tough job lately because they're now creating a game and they have to constantly do the process of, okay, let's remove this person. Let's remove that person. Yeah. When they released Battlegrounds, there were still they weren't able to pull people out of the game because they had already hit the point of no return with the game. So when at release, you still had people like Luke Gallows and Carl Anderson in that game. Eric Rowan was in that game. I don't. We're all kind of gamers at some point or another. We all love blowing off stream and things like that. Would you ever consider buying another WWE game, considering the changing landscape of the company, of the way the last game was played, anything like that? I know this is way off the topic of This Week in Wrestling, but
like I grew up with the I was a PlayStation guy, so I grew up with the SmackDown games growing up. But I think now it's a little easier because they could also bring in talent through downloads and patches now. But yes, like I'm sure like the creators there are having a tough time. Like at some point you've got to lock the roster no matter what. Like I think on a very micro level, we see it on Up Down Down. They do their Battle of the Brands, and they do creative characters in there of like their actual coworkers. And they had to, because it's a WWE owns Up Down Down, they've had to eliminate and create new wrestlers constantly, to the point where it's a joke now where Tyler Breeze, who is still on the show, has created himself in the game, and they're like, do I have to get rid of myself in the game now? Like it's ridiculous. Like they've had to change that roster so many times. Poor Austin Creed had to, or Xavier Woods has had to create new characters of his friends constantly, which is the same thing as you see probably 2K's doing as a game they're trying to rebuild from scratch over the last couple of years. But yeah, like it causes problems everywhere. I'm sure it's not fun for literally anyone. For us as fans, it's hard to invest in the wrestlers we like because we don't know if they're going to get released and have to wait 3 months to see them again, possibly if they get re-signed. But yeah, like the releases suck all the way around.
Cody?
I haven't bought a WWE game in probably about 5 years now. The 2K series kind of lost me right off the bat. I miss the old SmackDown vs. Raw games and whatnot. But I don't know. They'd have to do something special for me to really want to drop $70 or $80 on a video game at this point. I got WWE Battlegrounds, was a free PlayStation Plus game a couple months back here. Wasn't impressed with it. It was, it was fun little childlike graphics, but the game itself was mediocre at best.
And Astrid?
I haven't played a WWE game in a little bit of time, to be honest. I used to play my brother a lot, but at this point, basically seeing all these superstars that wouldn't be in the game anymore, I don't think there's any point in playing the game nowadays. But yeah, all these talent cuts and having, like you said, like Lauren said, to create all these people, I can't imagine that you like because they're not in the game anymore. It's disappointing.
It's probably a good explanation for why things are like as poorly developed gameplay wise as they are, because they're constantly having to revamp the roster over and over and over again, and budgets and timelines and everything. They run out of time to perfect the gameplay when they have to consistently be going back and redesigning who's in the game.
Yeah. And I mean, I made fun of it, but a wrestling news covering website, Wrestle Talk, posted a thing about, Daniel Bryan will be unplayable in 2K22. I'm like, no, of course he'll be playable. He'll be a community creations character 10 minutes after the game releases in general public. Like, there'll be 50 versions of him. Trust me, you can play him if you want to. But we're going to try to go away from the releases for now, and we're going to try to talk about the week in wrestling. But we're going to do it in a little bit different fashion. We're going to have everybody talk about their favorite moment in wrestling, and then we'll kind of go over what happened on the shows and if there's anything worthwhile talking about. So we'll start. Does anybody want to start with that? Does anybody have a moment from this week in wrestling?
I'll go ahead.
All right.
I've kind of made it known in a couple shows now that I'm a big fan of Hit Row.
No, I don't know if you know the rule. When we talk about Hit Row. Yeah, there we go. Okay.
There we go.
The boss is watching. I want to make sure, I do the right thing on the first show.
Their debut all along, everything to this point has been so well done. The part that really stood out to me on this week's NXT with them in the Legato feud is the fact that no matter what situation Swerve and Hit Row have been put into, they always end up the ones standing in the ring on top. And I feel like that's something we don't see enough of in most pro wrestling right now. Usually you end up one team stands on top one night, the other team comes out next week and is the one that's standing on top. And Legato has tried to have their number a couple times now, but the way they're selling and the way they're building and creating Hit Row right now, it's really just making that impact that I think everybody's recognizing that they're a big deal. And I think a big part of that is the fact that they always end out coming up on top.
Very true. I mean, me and Astrid cover NXT for the War Report, and our favorite segments to talk about, if it's not Cameron Grimes, is talking about this Legado del Fantasma and Hit Row. Because Hit Row is probably one of the hottest things in wrestling right now. And like we've said, the word we use on the War Report is authenticity. Both of these groups could be so ruined in WWE 90% of the time, but somehow they've made both of these groups feel real and authentic. Like the talent has a say in what's going on. You can really feel it with Hit Row. Like they're, you feel like nobody's holding them, that they're just like, what do you want to say? What are the words you're going to use? Because, WWE's learned you got to keep your promos watched to the vest, because if you don't, you'll end up with a Max Caster moment.
Well, and I was just thinking exactly that, Ed. They've let Top Dollar and Ashanti go off a couple times, and whether it's scripted or not, it feels like an authentic freestyle, especially on Top Dollar's part. And every time he goes, you wonder, like, what could he say? But he always keeps it contained enough where Max Caster pushes that, that PG era, he pushes into that attitude, trying to be edgy and say stuff that's going to get a wow moment. But as we saw this week, it doesn't happen that way. It turns around and goes negative on him.
And we're going to talk about the Max Caster, I think, at the end of this little roundtable. I want to talk about Max Caster because I have an interesting question to deal with, how AEW's handled that versus how they've handled a lot of other controversial moments lately. Favorite moments in wrestling, Lawrence or Astrid?
I'll go with NXT as a whole. I'm just going to jump off that. I like, especially like Hit Row, also big fan. Like it's the not too subtle Death Row stable.
Oh yeah.
And I do like all the, like, after Undisputed Era exploded, now, like, in their wake, there are a bunch of little dominant, like, there's, Undisputed was the dominant faction. Now there is a bunch of other factions forming, trying to take that mantle, with Hit Row being number one. You've got the Liga de Fantasma, who they're feuding with, fighting over that. And you've also got, I guess, I'll see the version that comes out next week, but Diamond Mind. Also in there. Like, I'm actually enjoying them. They're sort of like this three different factions that are starting to pop up.
Don't forget about Pete Dunne and his friends.
Yeah. Oh yeah, it's true. Like you've got like, it does give, like, it becomes sort of interesting that, like, in the wake of Undisputed Era, you've got some of the members scattered in some places, but now you've got these different factions trying to become the head of NXT, and I'm really enjoying watching that. Like, I like Hit Row's feud right now. It's a lot of fun. Like, they're both sort of tweeners, I guess. Hit Row was sort of ended the match as a babyface, standing on top. Yeah, I like Top Dollar. He's doing a great job, especially that, like, he was first introduced as the guy from A&E a couple weeks before, and he completely turned that around, and, like, he looks like a straight up badass who you don't want to mess with. And it was the perfect thing for sort of Scott. It's sort of like he was sort of meandering in NXT for a bit, and, like, this makes him look like an absolute superstar.
Astrid?
I'm gonna cheat a little bit. I would say, like, for me, the Dakota promo on NXT this week is something that stood out to me. I like how it was well done, given the history of Raquel. But also, when it comes to matches, I really enjoyed Bianca and Zelina on SmackDown, and the back and forth with Sasha in that mix as well. Not only the promo was, like, to the point, and it was a good way to start SmackDown, because I feel like it didn't take too long, and all three of them were highlighted in their moments. And the match too, I really enjoyed it. And I wish Zelina would have won because I feel she's been losing too much since she came back. And I really am a fan of her, but I'm hoping she gets her moment soon.
Yeah. And for me, my moment of the week is I mean, we're 3 out of 4 of us. All 4 of us. We're also talking about NXT. Yeah. I'm gonna go to Walter versus Ilya Dragunov 2 is coming. Yeah. And that promo package may have been one of the best promo packages I've seen from WWE and NXT in a long time. It's I rewatched that match again. It is as brutal as it was before. It's going to be amazing. I honestly feel it should main event TakeOver. I think it's that big of a match that you could have an NXT UK title match as the main event of your SummerSlam weekend instead of the potential crowning moment of Samoa Joe as your NXT champion. Another thing I've liked is the breakout tournament. Not just this week. I mean, this week I thought it was a little bit of a lower week. If you can get lower than, Blake Christian versus Joe Gacy, which is a fantastic match. But the fact that for the second time now they've had this tournament and it feels like they really understand how to put these talents on a pedestal and make these guys feel big time without having had much TV time. These matches don't feel throwaway. They don't feel like they're just filling the time on the brand. They feel like they're a big deal and they feel like they're important. And I've said it a couple times in the War Report, and I'll say it here. I think the best way to do this is whoever wins, and I honestly don't care of the 4, Odyssey Jones, Blake Christian, Christian Casanova, or Duke Hudson. And I know 2 of those names aren't the names I'm supposed to use, but the 2 names I know them by. So I honestly don't care which of them wins. I think what should happen is if Samoa Joe main events, I think whoever wins this, if Samoa Joe or Cross wins, they cash in like a Money in the Bank briefcase on Samoa Joe or Karrion Kross, and you put the NXT title on one of these breakout stars. Because Joe doesn't need the title, and Kross honestly needs to drop it as quickly as possible. Mm-hmm. And I think it would be great to have one of these guys carry the title, even for a month or 2. Just give them a shot at the top and just put them over big. And after a brutal knockdown drag out like we're going to have with Joe versus Kross, you could believe it that they could sneak in the back door and get a win. Again, fantasy booking. I'm sorry. I apologize. But we're going to get back to now that we've talked about some of that, the AEW stuff, and we brought it up before. The turtles are falling off Cody's wall. But we're going to get back to the Max Caster rap. Obviously, it was offensive. Obviously, it was slightly uncalled for. We've been conditioned in this wrestling world to know that certain things don't matter and certain lines can get crossed. John Cena for years has done raps similar-ish to this. He's been similarly offensive, but I feel like the Max Caster one jumped over a big line, because it always felt like with John Cena, there was at least consent with the people in the ring and in the segment that they kind of knew what they were getting into. It felt like they were part of the gag. Especially with Kurt Angle and Big Show and things like that. They always felt like they were part of the show and it was understood. You could tell very quickly from watching that video, especially as soon as that shot went to Julia Hart, she was uncomfortable. She didn't like that. Oh, we've got a raid from Tom Collihue, friend of mine, who's raiding with 14 people. Thank you, Tom.
Hey.
Greatly appreciate it. Tom has just finished his own coverage of the releases and news that's in there. So I'm sure I'll have something to listen to once I get done with this. Mm-hmm. As some of you know, I mod for Tom Collihue, so unfortunately I wasn't in there paying much attention today. So hopefully Tom had a good stream. But with the Max Caster one, I felt bad for Julia Hart because not only did he take the shot with the Duke case, which was unnecessary, like the Simone Biles one, while it's in poor taste, it's you can get by with trying to dig on pop culture. WWE did it. They should have realized after that it was a bad idea, but it is what it is. But my worst part was the Julia Hart comment because you can see the look on her face as she's reacting to that she absolutely was uncomfortable, that she didn't feel like it was okay. And Tony Khan goes on Busted Open, and he apologizes that the segment made it into dark. But he never once really apologizes for the segment as a whole. And like we have evidence that they take things like this seriously with the punishment to Sammy Guevara. Do you guys think that Max Caster needs to have something? I don't want him to lose his job because he doesn't deserve that. Nobody deserves to lose their job. But should there be a suspension? Should there be a fine? Should he have to issue an apology? What do you guys think about the situation and how AEW should handle it going forward?
On a whole, like it was bad, lazy writing. It was just in the comedy world. It was hack, easy stuff. Like the Simone Biles joke was the easy joke to make. Like the whole thing, the Julia comment was just creepy. Like still a teenager. There's ways to get heat on a female wrestler without making a sexual joke. Like the whole thing, super lazy on his part, immature. Like he's gonna have to learn to do better. Like maybe, yes, probably you should face either a fine or probably lose time. But like you've got a brand here, which is coming under scrutiny for not putting on only one women's match a week, and you put a promo that you know is going to go viral. Like it does what it's supposed to do. It was supposed to be clickbait. He knew when he first mentioned Simone Biles that it was going to probably get a lot of clickbait, get a lot of attention. But it's cheap and easy. As somebody I grew up watching comedy, he's like the hack comedian in the back that makes this same that during the Monica Lewinsky trial made it for the Bill Clinton thing, made it for years after 10 years afterwards because he killed the first few years. It's the same thing. It's hack. It's super easy. It was a cheap joke at the end of the day. I think he should apologize, a sincere apology online. If he 100% learned his lesson, because a lot of people just I'm sorry you were offended. That's not an apology. If you sincerely understand why people are angry or people are disappointed in you for making a lazy joke, then yes, I don't think he deserves a big punishment or a long suspension. But as long as he learns his lesson, I'm fine with it and moves on.
Anybody else? Astrid?
Yeah, I was thinking from the beginning when I was listening to the clip of the Tony on Busted Open. I was thinking, yeah, you were talking about how you're gonna fix it, but where's the apology in this whole thing? And I think I probably would have seen it, and you guys clarified it for me. I haven't seen Max apologize since it happened either. So I think Sammy apologized when everything in his situation happened, and they announced it right away. Yeah, this is what's gonna happen, and they haven't said anything with Max. They've been really quiet about it, just adding it out the clip, re-uploading the episode, nothing happened, and it shouldn't be that way. And I guess people are yeah, he should get some heel heat. I understand you want to get heel heat, but dissing somebody's sports team or dissing the town itself. But to talk about a 19-year-old, and not only that, but to see her facial expression, her discomfort, and to talk about mental illness the way he did, I watched it once and I couldn't watch it again, and that was enough. And a lot of people keep comparing it to what happened to Charlotte mentioning Simone Biles on Raw. Yeah, I didn't like that either. When she said Simone Biles, I'm let me see how she's gonna bring this up. And when she finished her promo on that part, I'm like, yeah, that's not it. That shouldn't have been brought up on Raw the way she did either, and compare it the way it was compared to her mental illness. That, to me, that's something you don't compare it to, especially to what Charlotte compared it to. They shouldn't have been brought up in the first place.
Cody?
Yeah. No, it's the thing that's really left me pondering with the Max Caster situation right now is, though, all of the focus is on him. The words came out of his mouth. He's got the question. Tony apologized that it aired. Probably should have apologized that it happened at all. But what about Max's partner? Because he was pretty well prepared to grab that mic out of Max's hand. Did he know what was going to be said? Or was that an authentic reaction to him being shocked and cutting him off at the last moment? Was he actually going to go through with finishing up the V word at the end?
No. Like, that's usually their bit, is the like third punchline. He pulls the mic and goes AEW, and then they start their match. That's like it's their end point. They know, like, he knows after the third line to cut him off.
But right there, then, so he knew that something was coming.
Yeah,
that you kind of question: did he know the bit entirely, or did he just do it because that's how he reacts regularly? Mm-hmm. And if he was involved and he knew what was scripted or what was going to be said, then he should be held accountable too. And the tag team should possibly be dropped not fired, but like dropped from programming. Put back on squash matches, something like that. Some kind of punishment for something that big and that disruptive, I guess, is the best way I can put it.
Yeah. And continuing with AEW while we're there, we have the interesting continuing of a feud with Hangman Page, amidst reports that Hangman Page may not be the main event match at All Out, and the bringing in of Christian Cage as a potential number one contender for Kenny's AEW title. Do you guys want to see Kenny Omega versus Christian? And do you think that do you think that they're potentially pushing Hangman Page aside in knowing that they're bringing in people like CM Punk and Daniel Bryan, and they're going to continue long-term telling this Hangman Page story?
I'm okay with the Christian being inserted in here if we still get the Hangman payoff at the end. There was a comment this week about Cody talking about him and Malachi being on TV instead of saved for a pay-per-view, and how he wants Dynamite to feel just as important, that he doesn't want to have to save big matches for pay-per-views, especially since AEW doesn't do as many pay-per-views. And it left me wondering that maybe that's where they're going with this Hangman story now, is let Christian take that spot at All Out in a few weeks' time. Let Christian have his moment there while they kind of let Daniel Bryan and CM Punk or whoever else decides to debut at All Out come in and have their moment in the sun, and then pay off the Hangman story on free TV, cable TV. Put them on TNT and have Hangman get that moment with a bigger audience, not necessarily having to pay for it, and really send home that idea that Dynamite is a big, worthwhile show to watch and not your typical Raw that's just filler until the pay-per-view gets here.
Yeah. And as we've seen two comments telling us that, rumors are that Page's partner may very well be giving birth right around the time of All Out, and he may have asked for time off around that period to be able to do that.
Which, like, for me, actually now makes sense. Like, not knowing that going in, I was absolutely befuddled, because you've got, like, AEW doesn't really have exactly like a WrestleMania where we know an endpoint, there's going to be a potential payoff to storylines. So, like, we're never sure exactly how a storyline's going to end or where it's going to end. And then, like, you had such a, like, homegrown big potential moment there with Hangman Page being the guy to beat the unbeatable Kenny Omega right now. You've built Kenny Omega up with all the titles, this faction that's unbeatable, and this, like, group of lovable, scrappy underdogs in the Dark Order and Hangman Page who are just beloved now. It would be like bigger, like, probably one of the bigger moments AEW has ever had is Hangman Page finally holding up that title as a, like, true baby face. And, like, it sucks that we're going to potentially have to wait a little longer for it, but, like, hopefully they don't give up on that storyline, because it's so perfect and it's almost organic how the fans have gotten behind him in such a way that he's the biggest pop every night in that company.
All right. I'm going to duck out for a moment, but I'm going to let Astrid talk for just a minute, and I shall return in just a moment. Okay.
Yeah, to me for this is the build-up has been great enough that it should end at like his high moment of winning the title. I'm like, there's no way you build him up this whole time just to not having be even involved in the title match. I'm like, there's no way. People are so behind him that I can already imagine how big the cheers and the pop will be for him when he wins the title. I'm like, there's no way you take that moment away from him after all these build up. I'm like, it's like starting the story and just keeping it like this. No, you need to like give us that great ending that we're all expecting and waiting for as well. And yeah, and I just when I see this, I'm like, yeah, it has to give us that good feeling ending that we all want from Hangman in this storyline. Like it has to happen. If it doesn't happen at all out, then it is to happen sooner rather than later. Because how are the fans gonna feel at the end when he just like disappears off the title picture just like that and nothing ever happens? I'm like, there's no way they're gonna end it like this after all this time. I'm like, if you have planned it out, you need to have it from start to finish. And to me, they need to finish it off with him like this.
Oh yeah, like
And
especially. Oh, go ahead. Sorry, Astrid.
no. Go. Yeah, I was gonna say if anybody wanted to speak about it.
Yeah, like you're looking at a roster that within the next few months is only going to get more saturated. There's going to be TV time is going to become more and more scarce because you're going to get more and more stars. Like a few of the people coming in there from a release or might end up over at AEW, and you've already got the rumor names that we almost confirmed now that are going to show up there. And like the thing with that is you want to give them stories like time, and you don't want to lose that Hangman Page thing because like every fan, even though I don't buy the whole he's a WWE guy, like everyone pretty much has had time. Even MJF has been worked as an extra in WWE. Like everyone's been around there. But yeah, like I think they have something like I think one of WWE's smartest moves was jumping on Kofi Mania and seeing that organic moment. It's like this is perfect for us for a main event, and like it was like one of my favorite moments the last few years of WWE, watching him finally get his roses and finally get the championship that he deserves. So you need to have that in Hangman Page, who is just an all around like in and out of the ring everyone loves and wants to see succeed. And like it seems just like so obvious to put him over and make him the face of the company for a bit.
Yeah, that's a good comparison to when it also reminds me, like for example, with Britt Baker. Like we all saw her with the injuries going up and down like this, and we're like at the end we expected her to win that championship, and when we saw that it was coming up, we're like, yeah, she's winning it. We all knew it, but still the people were into the match. People were cheering for her, the pop that she got at the end, even being a heel because she has earned it. That's the payoff that we wanted from this match and this rivalry, and we got it, and that's how it should be with Hemming as well.
Yeah, and I mean, I think they've done such a good job in AEW of telling stories over a period of time. Nothing seems like it's very few stories in AEW seem like they've been rushed. I still feel you rushed FTR versus the Young Bucks. And I feel like that's been one big detriment to that company is that feud wasn't a feud and it was sort of like a one-off type of thing. And hope I know we're going to get it again, and I know it's going to be fantastic. But after all the build to that story, it really felt like it was like denied gratification. It's like, here, you get this one great match. Now we're going to move on. When we've all been waiting for that match for years.
Yeah, I feel like it was cut too short.
But AEW has done such a great job of capturing the zeitgeist of the fans, and in 2 years, they're steadily getting near 1 million viewers for their product and for their wrestling show. And that's amazing, considering what we've seen from Impact and things like that, that have tried to go ahead and be that de facto competition to WWE. And you're seeing a show like AEW compete in the demographics and beat Raw in the demographics. But, there's still... I'd put a chart from Brandon Thurston. Their highest average is probably somewhere around like 1.1 ish million viewers. Raw at its worst is still drawing 1.3 to 1.5 million viewers. SmackDown right now is consistently doing near 2 million viewers. With bringing in Punk and Bryan, can you bring in enough fans to make the switch? Is there enough fans out there that can enjoy the AEW style that this can be a legit competition where they can get to the 1.5 million fans? Granted, it could take years to get there, but do you guys think that this is the first step in getting to AEW Dynamite beating Raw in the ratings?
I think they're close. I think a lot of it may hinge on how things go coming up here with the Rampage debut next week. Because a big question mark I have with Rampage right now is they're going to have all this extra time to fill story-wise, and I really hope they don't fall into that same trap that WWE did for a little while, where both shows, both Dynamite and Rampage, end up telling the same stories throughout the week, that you have Omega and Page or Omega and Cage on every single show. I like the brand split in WWE for that reason, that you get different stories on each show, and I'm not opposed to them not having to split. It's just a matter of making sure you're filling that time with unique stories and letting your stories breathe, as opposed to overwhelming your fans. And if they can do that and they do it well, I think absolutely Dynamite passes Raw, and I think Rampage could be a legit contender to compete with SmackDown every week.
Okay. I was just saying, SmackDown's at 2 million viewers. I think a 1 hour show at 10 o'clock, it's going to be tough.
You start drawing in those fans, though, Ed, and I don't think it's very far off from them being able to hit that too. If they're at the 1.1 right now and they start getting the viewers on both shows and can start putting on consistently good stories between the two shows, absolutely, I think they can get there.
The other question I had is, bringing up Rampage, are we going to watch Rampage? I know I'm tuning in this next weekend to find out what happens on Rampage. Everybody else, I assume?
Yeah, for sure. Like with AEW, it's always a surprise every week, so you never know what's going to happen, who's going to show up. So like, it's better to tune in and watch it rather than see it online later.
Yeah.
At least as the person in Canada, they haven't announced who's carrying it yet. If it will still be TSN, like the other AEW, but I will try. I will definitely watch it either the night afterwards. But yeah, I'm definitely massively interested in what they're going to do with Rampage, and how they're going to utilize their continually growing roster, and who they're going to showcase with that second show.
Now, I've fantasy booked this again, and I love to say the words fantasy book because I do it in my head all the time. Originally, I had thought that the August 13th Rampage debut was the space to bring back a very popular WWE superstar on SmackDown on that same night. I now think it might be worthwhile to bring her back the night before SummerSlam. Is there a chance that on August 20th, we see the re-debut of Becky Lynch? I know it's counter-programming and WWE doesn't do that. But what a moment it would be to 9:55 on SmackDown. Sasha Banks is standing over, Bianca Belair, holding up that SmackDown Women's Championship, and all of a sudden, that music hits. And all she has to do is walk out on the ramp, stand there, point, and walk away.
I mean, oh my gosh.
She's definitely going to be coming back soon. That's not really a big secret. I think they either going to wait till at SummerSlam. I think they want everyone talking about it, going over to Raw to have that big moment. like I don't think they're because I sort of this is gonna be a rare time I'm gonna say these words. I agree with Vince McMahon to a certain extent that that AEW isn't necessarily their competition. Their competition is literally any other form of entertainment that's going for eyeballs now because the entertainment industry is so saturated that TV ratings don't matter what they used to 10, 15 years ago. As long as you prove you have a stable fan base for a period of time for like a wrestling show, like you can pull in 1 million, you're fine. And like Vince and WWE do that. But yeah, like I don't think they're gonna use it to necessarily counter program AEW. I think they're going to probably use it to have a big moment either on SummerSlam or maybe the night after SummerSlam on Raw. Have her come out and either start a rivalry with somebody else. But I wouldn't mind seeing her on SmackDown and brought into that feud.
Cody, not Astrid, any thoughts?
I think I definitely think the counter programming. I mean, I could understand trying to do it to try and like steal those views away, but ultimately, I think it's a bigger moment to do it at the end of SummerSlam or at the end of that match at SummerSlam at least. And whether Bianca or Sasha wins, have Becky show up at that point and confront them either on the stage or in the ring. Something in that match, maybe a little bit of overbooking in the match, even to have her come out and disrupt something, costing Sasha the match. Anything along those lines, I think, is a bigger impact than just an end of the show on the stage as we fade to the credits.
Yeah, and I mean, I wholeheartedly agree. I think the bigger impact for her would be coming back at SummerSlam or coming back on Raw after SummerSlam. Matt brings up a good point. SmackDown doesn't need Becky Lynch. Her business is more on Raw. I wholeheartedly agree with both of those statements. That being said, if you're trying to make sure that you keep the conversation on WWE heading into what could potentially be the debut of CM Punk in Chicago on the 20th at the United Center. You need something big. The biggest gun that they have left that they haven't shot yet is Becky Lynch. And I just feel like WWE needs to make sure that they keep the focus on them that weekend, because the worst possible outcome that they can have is, regardless of Rampage's ratings on that night on the 20th, if AEW can steal the wrestling world's thunder the night before SummerSlam, and all day and all night, all we can talk about is CM Punk as we get ready to go into what looks to be a really good SummerSlam, by the way. Mm-hmm. This card is really shaping up. Roman Reigns versus John Cena. I know it's John Cena and we don't have to get excited about it, but this John Cena versus this Roman Reigns feels like a big deal. This match feels like a big deal. Do I wish the title wasn't on the line so that there's maybe more pushing come into what the outcome might be? Yeah, I kind of wish there was no title on the line for it. That being said, I think it's a match that it's not just, in comparison, it's not something thrown together that we don't want to see, like by Goldberg versus Bobby Lashley, which, again, I'm really hoping ends with Big E getting his dream match and having Big E cash in on Goldberg and beating Goldberg for the World Championship and moving to Raw. Brock Lesnar's a great name, but Brock Lesnar's been in talks with AEW, supposedly, as the rumor mill will say. Yeah, last night on SmackDown, it didn't seem like John Cena versus Roman feels like a big deal. But in my mind, and maybe this is just the kid who watched John Cena as he grew up, him versus this Roman Reigns is an interesting dichotomy. You have Sasha Banks versus Bianca Belair again. One of the best matches of the entire weekend at WrestleMania. The night one main event was absolutely fantastic. So rerunning that back seems like a great idea. Charlotte versus Nikki versus Rhea, while I'm not super excited for it, I feel like it should be a good match. Charlotte and Rhea have great chemistry. Charlotte and Nikki seem to be working pretty well together. So that should be good. And there are going to be a host of other matches that Edge versus Rollins, as Matt points out. Edge versus Rollins is going to be fantastic. It's the only match he's looking forward to. It's one of a couple, and I think that there's some more matches building. The Finn versus Baron Corbin, which is one of my favorite things on SmackDown right now. Poor Baron Corbin. Oh, that poor man. If you can ever donate to that donate link that doesn't work and it's just a picture.
I can't wait till like he has to sell the Deep Six or
Oh
the
my
End of
God.
Days, and somebody else has to use it.
But
Like
I
he
mean,
goes for it like can't anymore. It's not mine.
Now, you talk fantasy booking, Ed.
yeah.
How's this for some fantasy booking?
Oh, I love some fantasy booking.
We get the resolution to the LA Knight and Cameron Grimes story, and then LA Knight comes up and buys Baron Corbin.
I'm going to be disappointed when this doesn't happen now. Oh, I'm going to be so disappointed. That is absolutely genius. Oh, I love it.
Yeah.
I love it.
Yeah.
Yeah, we didn't get Finn versus the Brave versus the Demon, so it is unfortunate. But Bray was too creative for his own good in the company he was in. I know it sounds like it sounds like a backhanded compliment, but another funny idea. This from our friend WrestleMania. I see this ending with Baron Corbin winning the lottery or something. That would be fantastic. They've trademarked Happy Corbin, so it's going to happen at some point. Yes, that is a WWE trademarked phrase, Happy Corbin. So I can't wait to see how that happens. But no, like I was saying, I really like the idea of Cameron Grimes and LA Knight finally get a resolution. The fact if he were to buy him, that would just be that would be absolutely fantastic. Matt brings up a good point. This looks like another match we'll probably see. Yeah. Apollo versus Nakamura. Yeah. I'm in for that. Anything that Nakamura does is honestly great with me. No, Apollo really hasn't done anything with the IC title, but it's gotten him on TV. He's in a character that he finally feels comfortable with. It's nice when you watch Apollo Crews right now on television. He feels like he's invested in what he's doing, which I haven't felt like he has been for a while.
But who has done anything with the IC title recently?
The Miz.
Yeah, recently.
I will always say The Miz for anything revolving around the IC title.
I would say like the Big E made it look like a hard to win title. Like my fantasy booking, the whole thing was I would have liked to see him hold on to it for maybe lose it once or twice throughout the year, but hold on to it for pretty much the rest of the year and go title for title with Roman Reigns at WrestleMania, just the both of them, and it would have heightened both titles up so much and been felt like a natural super fight. But yeah, I felt Big E did a good job with it up until they gave it and did a good, it was smart to put it on Apollo because he's a guy who wasn't doing much, but it gives him more time on SmackDown.
Yeah. As far as you guys are concerned, which event on WrestleMania weekend, SummerSlam weekend, are you looking forward to more? Are we looking forward to SummerSlam, or are we looking forward to Takeover?
Takeover.
It's always
a tough one.
It's always going to be a little bit more Takeover for me, but I'm generally excited for SummerSlam. I'm actually really excited for the Roman John Cena match. That's going to be fun. I want to point out one thing that WWE, there's a lot to be negative about with them, especially this past week, but something they do well, which also highlights two of AEW's biggest flaws, is they're putting on a big women's match between Sasha and Bianca, who's got a good story tie. Not only is it a big women's match, but it's two women of color, which they have struggled in their main event picture to highlight any major, like outside of when Nyla Rose won the title. There haven't been like they've struggled. Like their main title has just been like basically just white folk winning, and WWE does a better job recently. Like again, they've only got a long history of not doing that, but in recent years they've definitely gone better of highlighting and bringing stars of like giving people opportunity who aren't necessarily the generic like white person that we have always seen. And they're doing a great job there with Bianca and Sasha. I'm excited for that match.
Yeah, I mean, I saw a post, and I mean, it's not something I like to highlight, but there was somebody who put a very controversial post of a lot of things that AEW has done with whom their champions would have been. But other than Riho, Nyla Rose, and Scorpio Sky, their diversity at the top of the title scenes in any title picture has been lackluster at best. I mean, I guess you could call Miro a champion of foreign descent if you want to include him in there. But I mean, for a company who's all about diversity and putting women first and making tag team wrestling relevant and all of the things that they promised us at that rally in Jacksonville all those years ago when they decided to start AEW, they've still got a little bit of room to climb. Granted, I know the pandemic put a lot of plans that they had in place with the Joshi girls on hiatus, and I get that, and I'll give them the benefit of the doubt on that. But there is so much good American indie female talent in this world that wasn't signed by WWE that they could have put over during that time. And they left Riho as champion when they could have just been like, look, we can't have her work right now. We're taking the title. They had Hikaru Shida, who was their women's champion for a while. And again, Hikaru Shida was fantastic as their women's champion, but their women's division has been lackluster at best. Britt Baker was fantastic, but Britt Baker was fantastic while injured for a majority of the time that she was fantastic. Matt bringing up the Hikaru Shida as well, saying that she should have been the first AEW women's champion. I think Nyla Rose was a great choice to be in there with Riho. I'm surprised they put it on Riho. And like I said, I think they got a little bit of bad luck, but they seem to be turning the corner on telling at least a compelling women's story. Now they have to try to figure out a way to tell more than one compelling women's story in 2 hours.
Yeah.
Because like you said, everybody's figured out that their formula, that they have one essentially women's segment every Dynamite. And for a company who says that they're going to put the women on the same pedestal as the men, it becomes a problem when you're not doing that. I mean, they're getting better with Britt Baker, and they're still young and they still have time. But they made a big deal about this women's division coming into it, and I feel like they can do a little bit better.
Yeah, I think they have good talent too. Because look at we have Red Velvet, who's been doing so good lately. They have Tay Conti, who's been winning matches, and I'm like, do something else with her. And Chris Statlander has been doing so well as well. She's been so popular lately too since her return as well. So you have options.
Yeah, they have a litany of female talent on that roster. Abaddon is a character we haven't seen on Dynamite in a while.
Yeah.
Now, granted, she's a bit spooky. She's a bit weird. She's probably not great for TNT's thought process of what they want on their television screen. But, I mean, she's a needle mover, and she could be interesting. And I feel like it's a shame that they're not showcasing as much of these women's talent on television. They've done a great job showcasing them on Dark and Dark Elevation. And I think that comes as a positive and a negative to the AEW landscape is they have so many matches with so many people on these YouTube only shows, and they don't do a good enough job of telling us or showing us what's happening on those shows, even though what's happening on those shows is integral to storyline development on Dynamite and the changing in the rankings. Because we've seen, and Cody, we talked about this, about how the ratings are a good idea and how they bring up, a good way of telling a story and changing out contenders and making things feel new and relevant. But they need to bring up more on television what the rankings are, who's where, and what, how people are moving up. Because you see these records on there, and all of a sudden I'm looking at somebody like Red Velvet, and they're like, I'm 21-1 in the this year, and I'm like, on what? Like, I barely knew who you were if they hadn't said it on commentary. Like, I mean, it's fantastic that they have these outlets to put these talents on and get them over, but I feel like dark and dark elevation matches should be like 0.25 and 0.5 wins per win you get on those shows, because they don't bring up, like, they run a ticker. Like, we run this wonderful Love Wrestling ticker at the bottom of our screen that tells you where you can find us. And you should find us on all these lovely places, on YouTube, on Twitch. Give us a like, give us a subscribe, follow us on Twitch. If you want to subscribe or send us bits. Go to www.ratethispodcast.com/lovewrestlingca. Help us become one of the best podcasts in Canada. Find us on Facebook at lovewrestling.ca. But that being said, this ticker's been running most of the show, and it's the same thing that happens during Dynamite with their results for AEW Dark and Dark Elevation. And I barely notice them sometimes because, and you're putting on great matches with great talent, but they're not getting the screen time on Dynamite, which is where you need to have your people, showcased, because that's where 99.6% of your talent, your viewership, watches.
I think even just like the ticker is a great idea. I think you could have down on the ticker there a spotlight of, the top 5 or top 10 men, top 5 or top 10 women in like each division. But also there's just so many segments that we talked about on the War Report on Wednesday that, like the Dan Lambert one, where like, did we really need that? And I think taking one of those segments and even just a quick recap by Tony or JR or Excalibur or somebody, like, here's what happened if you missed Dark this Monday. This person got to win, this person got to win, this person got to win. Check us out Monday nights on Dark. Promote your other shows, because coming into AEW new, I'm like, we got Dynamite. What is Dark? What is Dark Elevate? Like, I didn't know until I started digging a little bit more and promoting those shows, especially as a newer company, as you're trying to build your audiences. I understand it's more of like what Sunday Night Heat used to be, but at least put it out there and acknowledge that it's happening if these wins are going to matter as equal wins to what's happening on Dynamite.
Yeah, that makes me think like they could maybe put when they come back from the commercials, maybe put a little clip of a match or two and just say this one's from Dark Elevation, this one's from Dark, just to give people a little bit of the action of what they would have seen if they would have watched the show. And I'm hoping another thing is with Rampage coming up, I'm hoping they'll shuffle some of that storylines that they have on Dynamite, put them on Rampage, so we also get more women's segments on Dynamite, because that's another thing they're lacking. I'm like, I want more of the girls to be featured on a weekly basis, and we don't get that. I'm like, how do you have, I know she's injured, but Britt being champion, she's been doing promos lately more than matches. And I'm like, I want to see her wrestle more often, and we don't even get that. Yeah.
Lawrence?
Oh. Yep, sorry.
No, I caught you off guard.
Yeah. Where were we? Sorry, I was handling something else.
No, I'm sorry. We're talking about Dark and Dark Elevation and how it feels like AEW needs to do a better job of putting over the product, and especially with the rankings, where all of those matches matter in the rankings. About how it would be nice to have a bit of a recap.
Yeah, like they do it over commentary every so often. They'll bring up like they just won on Elevation last night. Yay! Like, and like we're supposed to. Like we're supposed to care that they're like you said earlier, that they're like they've won 10 matches, but again, like it's 10 matches, only a smaller segment of the audience is seeing, because they know most people just wait for the weekly shows on TV, and that's what they take more. Not necessarily obviously the YouTube shows aren't. No, it's like not they're not canon, but they're more tuned in to what's going on TV. So it's a good idea to constantly refresh people, and like it might help move their characters forward and move the storylines forward.
So, as we're nearing the end of the show, is there any topic that we should hit that we haven't hit yet?
I wanted to briefly touch with the talk that we had on the diversity in the women's wrestling in AEW and whatnot. Mm-hmm. The story now of Ruby going there and where she's going to fit in, because they're already struggling to get a lot of these talents on TV. And now Ruby, I mean, Ruby fits as kind of a diverse character in her part in the LGBT community, but it's still another white woman coming into that women's division and really kind of pushing aside any kind of, racial diversity that we're seeing in the division there, and like how we see her coming in and where she's going to go.
Yeah. I mean, it's AEW has done such a great job of making sure that they highlight diversity and they highlight people of different lifestyles and choices. Nyla Rose is a perfect example of them promoting a talent no matter what the talent's history is, and they are who they are as a person. We're going to push you because of who you are and what you are, not because of the fact that you fit a certain demographic or you fit a certain thing. Unlike WWE, especially back in the Attitude Era, they did a better job of it with Sonya Deville, where Sonya Deville's, it seems like they're pushing Sonya Deville, yes, because of who she is and a demographic that she can hit that some of the other ones can't. But at the same time, that's not a major part of her on-screen character. The fact that, she's out in the world and that doesn't play in. She's not in a lesbian angle on television. It's good. I mean, granted, if she wants to do that, they should be allowed to do that. But that being said, if she doesn't feel comfortable, I find it very impressive that Vince, in his spotty track record with, the lines of sexuality and what's acceptable and not acceptable, and the own things that they brought up in their own documentary about him, which we won't go into in this thing, but if you want to look it up, look up what Stephanie said about her father and an idea for an angle that even she said, no, Dad, that's disgusting.
Yeah.
And they put on HLA. So, and they sold Lita's belongings on her last night in the company. Like, they've done some terrible things. And even at that point, she was like, no, this has gone too far. But yeah, no, I think AEW could do a much better job hitting the diversity on television. It just seems like every now and then it just seems like it's token talk, and they need to do a better job of it. But then again, they could say about their entire women's division, and especially their main event men's scene. Does anybody have anything else?
Yeah, I want to say when it comes to like Sonya, for example, being the like you said with the history that WWE has, I'd rather not have Sonya in a lesbian angle, for example, because WWE wouldn't do it well. And I'm not saying I have an idea how it would go either, but I'd rather have her doing what she's doing now because she's highlighted and people know who she is and people know her background, than have her do an angle that will be atrocious to her, not only as a character, but in her career as well. So I like having her on TV every week. I love seeing her. I can't wait till she returns to the ring, but I'd rather have her doing things like this that, we can get to see her every week on a weekly basis. And it's something like, it's not being done in a wrong way. She's doing so well on TV right now.
Yeah, I mean, I honestly, part of me thought that when we got to the point where we saw her as the one who sent the text in the Mandy storyline, I know I was going to say, and Matt brings up the same point that I'm about to hit, that Mandy and Sonya, and I believe they were on board. If I remember correctly, the two of these talents were on board with this story because they felt comfortable with each other. but the story never happened. And I thought that was where that angle was going to head.
Yeah.
I'm glad it didn't, because, like you said, WWE has a very bad track record of taking those things seriously and doing a good job. However, I think if something like that were to happen in NXT, based on what we've seen with the cultural authenticity, I think that something like that might have hit better on with Triple H and his team, because they seem to have a better knowledge of how to make sure that the talent are included in storylines that could potentially become problematic.
Like at the end of the day, they just need to not treat it. The best way to do it is to just not treat it as necessarily salacious. That they're like the Mandy and thing have been like, it's playing on the stereotype a bit of the like the lesbian is in love with her best friend, and that like all gay people are like secretly in love with their friends. They can't just be friends with a single person. It sort of like plays on that like old stereotype a little bit. And like I think the best way to do it is just like you can have just a lesbian couple without harping on the fact that they're a lesbian couple, and have them feud with somebody else or feud with another couple. Just like you can just treat them like a regular couple. Like you can write. You don't have to necessarily play on the stereotypes of that or the architecture that has been done before. I feel is the best way to do it. Just treat it like a straight couple, and you're doing a storyline there.
This is how I felt about the Iconics storyline. It was exactly what you're saying, Lawrence. I felt the Iconics fit that part, and everybody speculated for weeks and weeks on whether Billy and Peyton were actually supposed to be a lesbian couple, or like, are they just friends? And just playing at that part, that whether they were lesbian or not, it didn't matter to the story on TV. They were really close, regardless of what they were.
Yeah, it's what the Golden Lovers try to do too. It's like they never said, "Hey, we're necessarily in a couple. We're legitimately forever. We're best friends. We're two guys. We show intimacy to each other on TV. It could be whatever you see. It is what it is. Like whatever you want. That's pretty much it.
I agree. You know, WWE wrestling in general has always had a problem with romance angles being portrayed in a positive way and getting over well in a realm of fighting and whatnot. Like, yes, there are some that worked out fantastic, but you know, like Edge and Matt Hardy, for example, on TV that was great. They pulled that off great. However, behind the scenes, we're ripping apart friendships, we're tearing apart lives, and we were doing it for entertainment. And everybody was kind of on board, but it just felt like, you know, it was problematic to an extent. That being said, I mean, WWE's had a bad track record of tact with important relationships and whatnot, and hopefully we can see better storylines on that as we go forward. But unfortunately, we're hitting our allotted time, so we're going to go ahead and start to call it. So we're going to go ahead and go around and give everybody a chance to talk about where they are, where we can find you, and what we have going on in the near future. Everybody's going to get the big screen. We're going to go around. So I'll start with Lawrence.
So, I am at Kurt Sandy G on Twitter and Instagram. You can find me later tonight, because an hour and a half of me, I feel not enough. You need more. You need multiple hours of me on this channel. I'll be on Blowing Off stream tonight with several other people, including some people that are here tonight. And I just want to put over quickly, I am Canadian. The Canadian women's soccer team did win the gold medal yesterday. I am super amped about that. The shout out to Stephanie LeBay, who is like you're talking about tough women, one of the best goaltending performances I've ever seen. Not wrestling, but like if you're just looking for sheer toughness and will and just a great story, I'm super proud of the Canadian women's soccer team.
Absolutely. And congrats on them for that gold medal. Astrid.
So I have for next week, I have the award report NXT again with JPJ and Ed as well. So I'm really excited about that and everything, because NXT keeps doing so well every week. But you can find me mostly on Twitter. My username is Astrid Pizarro, as it listed there. And my Instagram, which I barely use, is AshraPizarro20. So that's what I got.
All right. And Cody.
You can catch me on Twitter at Cody Defoe, as it's right that side. That side, right there. Yep. You can catch me Wednesday nights on the War Report with JPJ and Pluggo, reacting to all things Dynamite. And keep an eye out anywhere else you see us on the podcast, on the streams here. Saturday Reacts, Blown Off Streams, Sunday Brunch. Never know where I might pop my ugly face in.
I disagree. It's not an ugly face. It's a wonderful one. You can find me at edfries12584. As Astrid said, you can find me also with her and JPJ on the War Report on Tuesday nights covering NXT. I am bowing out of the War Report on Wednesday nights with Pluggo and JPJ, as Cody has wonderfully taken the place. So I'm very excited to hand the reins over to Cody so that I can let other people have the spotlight so that I don't have to have as much time on here.
Much appreciated.
So people don't have to see this ugly mug as much. I also moderate the Tom Collahue Twitch community, so you can find us over there at twitch.tv/Tom Collahue. And you can find us over there Mondays and Fridays for watch parties and spoiler warning. Spoiler warning, if you're not already watching it, is a fantastic place to hear some of the wrestling news before it ends up in a lot of other places. Tom is doing a fantastic job with that. Very interactive, answers a whole bunch of questions. That being said, I think we're going to go ahead and head on out of here. I don't think we're raining anybody today, so we're going to go ahead and call it a day. Thank you to everyone for joining me this afternoon, and hopefully you guys have a great day, and I will see you all later. Goodbye.